Hi guys, I hope you've all been keeping well. Today we're going to take a step away from my setups and we're going to take a look at yours. I asked you guys on my social media platforms to send me any and all setups you had. And I said I would make a react video whilst taking a look at those setups. Nice. If you haven't already, be sure to follow me on my social media so you don't miss out on stuff like this in the future. I do want to apologise if I don't include absolutely everything I got sent in this video, but I will try my best to include as much as I can. Okay, let's start with the first setup. Okay, so here we go. And it comes from AntsKnowledge on Instagram. He said, "This is my whole setup. Well, half of my colonies are in the fridge hibernating. Sorry for the mess. And by the way, that bottle is food dye for blue honey." There is a little bit of mess, but that's okay. I mean, I always forget to clean up and even clean out old test tubes sometimes. I can see you have your smaller colonies on the left there on the shelves. Well, I think they're shelves. I reckon that is where you would normally store files and letters. So you've definitely thought of an ingenious way to store your test tube colonies there. I see you have a larger setup on the right, maybe made out of acrylic, and then in the corner you have your live food containers, which is cool. One thing you could do with your live foods is if you keep mealworms, you can pop them in a small container which is made for insects. I don't have any insects in there right now, but yeah, I'd recommend using one of them. These are just easier to clean out and wash, as mealworms tend to poop a lot, and I find cleaning up after mealworms especially is quite difficult in these kind of tacky containers that you get from the pet shop. Let's have a look. So when having so many colonies like this here, I don't know about you guys, but I always like to keep track of their feeding and hydration schedules. So I actually keep a little logbook of when I have fed or hydrated my ants. It might be worth doing this if you plan on keeping 5 or more colonies of different species which perhaps require different feeding or hydration patterns. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next setup. So here we have a cool little setup that was sent to us by Horton on Instagram. So we have a granivore species, which looks to be Messer species, inside an ant shack nest. So a couple of things I'd probably say here. The outworld looks quite damp and overwatered. Messer are most of the time a dry loving species. So I would recommend probably changing this up to some gravel or some coarse sand. You won't need to hydrate the foraging area, just the nest. This will save you a lot of extra work and hopefully dry up the foraging area to give you a better viewing experience. So secondly, I see you have fed your ants a whole mealworm. Most Messer species will turn down insects for seeds, but if you do decide to try and feed your ants insects, you may have to cut them up into small movable pieces. It just makes it easier for your ants to carry the food just to their hungry larvae. But overall, a really nice setup. If you do decide to make any changes, be sure to let me know. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay, here we have a couple of pictures sent to us by Ants US or Ants us. A nice little setup, this one. Perfect size for the colony you have. It looks really clean and simple. I mean, you can't go wrong with that, really. These are the kind of setups which I like to call classic setups, where you simply have a nest and a foraging area. Perfect for both viewing and raising a young colony. Nice one. Right, let's check out another one. Here we have a setup sent to us by terroristic.und.co. Okay, so they have told me about the 2 nests shown in the picture are their own 3D printed nests, which is really cool. 3D printed nests are definitely becoming more of a thing nowadays, because the possibilities are endless, really. It seems like they have an ant store foraging area. You can always tell, as they are one of the few ant shops to make their setups out of glass. I see you've placed a test tube in the foraging area. That's always a good thing to do with your ants. So if your ants are ever thirsty, they have instant access to water. It's also a good indicator if the nest that they're in is too dry. Some ants tend to move the brood out of the nest and into the test tube. So if they do this, you know to add some water to your nest. Alright, that was pretty epic. That was a pretty epic setup. But we're going to move on to the next one. Okay, here we have a setup sent to us by Carl Moore on Instagram. Really nice, clean setup. I see you've gone for a white-tongue nest with a grout foraging area. And it all seems to be handmade by yourself, which is really cool. I see you have no ants in there at the moment, but this could definitely accommodate a colony of 10 to 30 workers, depending on the species. Awesome, nice one. Okay, let's check out another one. Just so you guys know, when I say, oh, you can do this, you can do that, I'm not saying what you're doing is bad or wrong. I'm just trying to help you out and perhaps improve your ant keeping experience. So we have a setup here from Ants and Fun. Cool name. Another simple setup with a test tube attached to a foraging area. One thing I can see with this setup is the test tube the colony it is in is a little bit mouldy. It may not be too bad, but it might be time to add an additional test tube. I always say if mould covers more than 25% of the submerged cotton bud, you should always change it up. Yeah, the water looks a little bit discoloured, so I'd recommend doing that as soon as possible, really. It may even be worth moving your ants into a small nest. But yeah, it's a nice little setup. Okay, let's get the next one up. So, alright. Here we have a collage of pictures sent to us by Arthur's Ants. So we have a couple of test tube setups here and an acrylic Ants Australia setup. The colony looks nice and healthy. Well, the colonies look nice and healthy. Seems like they have plenty of brood, which is a great sign. One thing I would say is that you're using a heat mat for test tube, and that's fine. I'd recommend moving the heat mat to the opening of the test tube rather than placing it directly under the water source, just because test tubes have a tendency to waterlog. Placing a heat mat just under an inch of a test tube's opening. Okay, so let's just pretend this is a heat mat, this piece of red film, and you've got your test tube. I mean, just popping it just about an inch over the test tube, like just about there, should be fine. If you go any kind of closer to the water source, you're probably going to overheat the test tube and it will waterlog. You can actually see in one of the pictures that one of the test tubes is already condensing quite heavily. So you just want to be careful, really. But a few cool colonies there. So we have Mesobarbarus, and he mentioned the other two colonies were Phenagaster and Camponotus. So yeah, nice little colonies there. Okay, what have we got for the next one? Right, we have a couple of setups sent in here from Jessica on Facebook. I don't know about you guys, but I can't help but to look at those dragon-like figures. I can imagine they are pretty scary to look at from an ant's perspective. But yeah, a nice clean setup you've got there, and there is a second picture. You seem to be continuing the theme with a 3D printed nest and foraging area, which is cool. I see you are keeping the colony on a windowsill. You just have to be careful with temperatures, because they can fluctuate quite dangerously if the setups are left in the sun. But if the window doesn't get much sun, I don't see it being a massive issue. But yeah, really nice, cool. Let's have a gander at another one. Whoa. Okay, so Mason here on Instagram has sent us an epic natural setup, complete with cacti, succulents, and some really decorative wooden rocks. That's a really cool setup, and it's definitely been scaped beautifully. I think there is an art to terrascaping. By terrascaping, I mean to create a natural looking environment which carefully balances the objects within it. And I think here you have the right amount of everything. Super cool. Okay, let's move on to another setup. Here we have an interesting one from Ants of Australia on Instagram again, where they have combined a whitong nest with a standard container on top. I love how you've taken the picture of what seems to be what I can only assume is your bed. Loving the duvet covers. Anyway, this setup is cool. I'm extremely jealous of you Aussies who have an abundance of that red sand. I'd love to get my hands on some of that. It's really nice. But yeah, it seems that you have made the most of the materials you had, and it all came together really nicely to make a nice little neat setup. Right, now we have another setup coming from Instagram from Roeven. Apologies again if I say it wrong. I'm really bad at pronouncing things anyway. And it's a 2-in-1 setup. This looks absolutely insane. This looks like it would accommodate thousands of ants. There's also decorative rocks, plants and sand, and I see he has used whitong as the nest material. There isn't much else to say, to be honest, other than it's really cool. And Roy, if you do get some ants in this setup, let me know. I would love to see the outcome. Okay, here is the next one, coming in from the lesser known ant keeper on Instagram, and he has said, "One big mess." You're not wrong there, buddy. This area needs a little bit of love and spring cleaning. It's nice that you have labelled up the colonies like that, so I can see what they are. I see you have a few colonies. You've got some wakushi setups there, which is nice. I want to know what that is. It looks like a carrot being used as lipstick, or is it just me? If you could let me know what that is, that would be great. You might need to change out your Lasius niger test tube there, bud. It's got a little bit of mould on it. I know Lasius are hibernating right now, but you can still definitely introduce a new test tube. Really cool setups there. Thank you for sending them in. Okay, next one, we have another natural setup here from AntJazz, which has his Camponotus barbosus inside. I have never heard of that species before. I'm just going to quickly Google it. It sounds too close to Captain Barbosa, if you ask me. They are only actually native to the Philippines, apparently. So that's cool. I mean, if you guys ever want to identify an ant species you have found, a good website that I use, which I'm using right now, is called AntWiki. It constantly gets updated, and you can see all the ants in your local area. This is a nice setup though. I love the use of the different plants. Perhaps you could add some more large rocks or decorative pieces of wood, just to give it some extra layers and depth perhaps. And if you have any close-up pictures of those Captain Barbossa ants, please send them over. That would be amazing. Right, let's have a look at another one. Okay, so this one was sent in on Instagram, again, by Viviendo con Hormigas. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I'm pretty sure Hormigas means ants in Spanish. Hola, gracias por suscribirte, Ants Britannia. I hope I said that right. I'm not gonna lie, that took me about 3 or 4 tries just to even say it, and I might have even said it wrong. Anyway, let's check out this setup. So we have an all-in-one setup that's made to look like a brick wall from one side, and I believe the nest material he's used is white-on. The nest and layout of the setup is amazing. The only thing I don't like is the artificial plants. I mean, some people like them and some people don't. I mean, I especially don't like vibrant, unrealistic plants. But I guess it all comes down to personal preference. One thing I may add as well about this setup, the sponge material you've used there, you just have to make sure it distributes the water once you add the water in. It looks like the sponge has micro bubbles, similar to a sponge that you would clean dishes with. Normally, these don't actually soak up water and distribute it unless you squeeze them to then soak up the water. You kind of want to find a sponge that is used on mops that will kind of soak up water without any applied pressure, really. This sponge might be the right sponge, but I just thought I would pre-warn you just in case. A really nice setup though. I'd love to see some ants in there. Okay, here we have another one from Oliver on Instagram. We have an Ants Canada setup, including some Myrmica rubra. Nice little setup, I like it. The only thing I would probably change is the length of tubing running from the nest to the outworld. I can't see how many ants there are in the nest itself, but considering there aren't any ants in the tubing, I would assume the colony is relatively small. For smaller colonies, you kind of want to make the journey from the nest to the outworld as short as possible. This will make it easier for ants to drag food back to the nest, as there may not be a lot of ants in the first place to kind of haul in big loads. But other than that, this is a really cool setup. This will be the last one now, guys, and it comes in from Florida Ants on Instagram. God, we're loving the Instagram today. And it is another all-in-one setup made out of white-on. There's a lot going on here to talk about. Firstly, there seems to be some sort of war raging on the surface of the nest. We have a mixture of plastic figures, palm trees, and even a tank. Don't think I've ever seen anything like this before. I can imagine when ants are in there, it will look really cool to have them kind of crawling everywhere. Do you know what would look really cool is if you had plastic figures in there, sculpted like they were brushing off ants, or perhaps if some of them were trying to like run away. You know, like from that scene from Indiana Jones when they're all getting chased by fire ants in the jungle. I don't know, but it's a really epic setup, and it seems to be custom made. So well done, buddy. You did a good job there. Okay, guys, so we're going to end the video there. I'm sorry if I didn't include everyone's setups. If you did like the video, just be sure to let me know in the comments section down below. And as always, you guys take care, and I'll see you in the next one.
Hola, gracias por suscribirte a Ants Britannia.
Hola, gracias por suscribirte a AntsKnowledge. Oh.